Welcome to the World of Warcraft art panel. Please join us in welcoming to the stage members of the World of Warcraft art team.
Hello, everybody. Hello? Welcome to the World of Warcraft art panel. My name is Rob Foote, and I'm the senior art producer on World of Warcraft. I'd like to take a minute to thank all of you for coming, especially early in the morning. It's especially impressive considering how many of you I watched close out the Hilton Bar last night. So, let me give you a synopsis of what you're going to see on this panel. We've got a lot of great things to show you, and what you're going to see is the work of over 40 of the artists on the World of Warcraft art team. They've been hard at work working on our new expansion. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's the Mist of Pandaria. So, the Pandaren are something we've really wanted to do for a long time now, and we're really proud that we've been able to actually dedicate an entire expansion to the Pandaren and to their lands. We've also been in production for a long time, so this art panel, we've got a lot of content to show you. Now, to introduce you to the rest of the art team, I'm going to hand it over to the art director and my friend, Chris Robinson.
Thank you, sir, and friend.
Enemy.
Ouch. So we literally created a massive amount of content for this expansion. And there's way too much to show you. We'd be here all week if we wanted to go through everything we've done. So it's been very difficult to pare down. We think we came up with a pretty cool show for you guys. But before we get rolling with that, I just wanted to take a minute to introduce you to these people. So first and foremost, you know Rob Foote. I have some pictures here. If I can get this thing to work. There we go. There's Rob Foote. Production mastermind of the universe. You know me, Chris Robinson, art director, and apparently I'm also a crazed homeless person if you look at this picture. Mark Gibbons, who you may not recognize because he actually took his makeup. This is what he looks like.
I can do the face.
There you go. So we require that he wear this makeup at work because we can't communicate with him if he looks like he currently does. But he wanted to show you all his beautiful face, so. Thomas Blue. Thomas Blue is our character art manager and our lead technical artist. He's also a millionaire in WoW, so whenever I need a loan, he's the guy I go to. Gary Plattner, lead environment artist, part-time pirate. And actually, this is pretty cool this year. We actually have a programmer up, which when I created the graphic, I put some binary code behind him so that you could tell that he's a programmer.
He lives in the Matrix.
And he was going to wear a t-shirt that said not an artist specifically, but I thought the code was sufficient. So cool, collected, German. Wendy Vetter, lead dungeon artist, also known as Darth Vetter, purveyor of finer things, which you gentlemen should be aware of. And last but not least, the most serious member of our art management team is Eric Browning, who also appears to be from the future. So that's about it for introductions. I'm going to hand it over to Mark Gibbons.
And me.
Talk a little bit about concept art. Thank you.
All right. Oh, here we go. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome.
World of Warcraft concept artist. It's not to say I'm the only artist on the WoW team that does concept art. We have an amazing selection of guys and girls who are great sketch artists as well as being 3D modelers, texture artists, and so on. What it really means is I'm the only guy whose skill set is so narrow I can't do anything else. But our player community has some other names for me. Crayon-wielding monkey, I was called just the other week. Wildly inaccurate, as you can see if you look at the magnificent illustration there. I'm a pencil-wielding monkey. It's also been suggested that I be rendered down into soap. I like that one. They weren't specific about a fragrance. I'm thinking rum and eraser, possibly. So you might be asking, well, what is it, Mark, that you do on a daily basis that would provoke such a passionate response from a certain section of our community? Well, it's this. Yeah. You're applauding. Since Tier 10, I've been responsible for the design of all the raid sets. So what I thought I'd do today is start by talking a little bit about the process, the design process that I go through to create these sets. It all starts with a brief from design. It'll usually just be the title of the set and then maybe a couple of lines of explanation if there's a particular theme or materials that they want to see in the armor. And then I'm left to my own devices. And I approach it as I would any other assignment. I look for sort of cool visual hooks, ideas to hang the design off, and a little bit of a backstory. I mean, for my benefit, if nobody else's. But what I realized as the tiers started to appear, and as I got to hear what the public thought of them, I realized that players care more about the way that their character looks than anything else in the game. And if you give them a set of armor, you ask them to wear something that they're disappointed in, they will tell you about it loudly and at length. So I realized that although there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of whimsy in WoW, and I think players embrace that. They really don't like it if you're lighthearted with their characters, unless they're gnomes, because the gnomes embrace the silly. Right. So here's a small selection of sets from tiers 10 and 11 that proved pretty popular. And one of the things that I find myself doing when the ideas come through from design is sometimes a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of wrestling over the ideas to try and to make sure that hopefully what I'm doing is cool and it's going to be something that players like. And the shaman set in the middle there, the Frost Witch's Garb, is a good example of me turning around to design and saying, can we do something else? Because the original brief was, the title came through and it was Vestments of the Five Elements. And my reaction was, bollocks. 5 elements, so it's earth, air, fire, water, and...
Love.
Love, says Eric. Bless him. You romantic old bugger. Could be love, could be bubblegum. Either way, you weren't going to be able to create hang a solid, cohesive design if you had to cover that kind of range of stuff. So I went back to design and said, can we try again? And to their credit, they said yes. And they said, what about a Vrykul themed set? Because this was in Northrend. And I had a design for a Vrykul boss that never made it into the game. He had a huge shovel-tusk skull underneath his cowl. So I showed that to design again. Said, yeah, we can do with that. We can build a set around that. And that's what we ended up with. And I think it's a mark of the set's success that, when I was here last year, somebody had built that costume. And I think if somebody's going to go to the time and effort, gluing all that cardboard together, sticking all that plastic, and wear it for 2 days, I probably did a good job. Thank you. The other thing I try and do is up the epic every time when the opportunity presents itself. And that can be tricky. That can be quite a balancing act because the bigger and the more elaborate the armor gets, the more potentially unwieldy, and you run the risk of doing something a little bit ludicrous. But at the same time, I think it's important that we try and push the envelope when the opportunity presents itself. When you get a design through or design come through and give you a brief for something you think, oh, I think we could do something that's a little bit outside the box here. It can polarize opinion. You can sometimes get people who you love it or hate it. Personally, I think that's preferable to just, it's all right, it's okay, I don't mind, I'll wear it for 6 months. I would rather have people love and hate the stuff. I mean, the Paladin set in the middle yesterday, again, saw somebody walking around with it in that outfit. And I wanted to go up to her and say, I'm sorry you've got to drag that around with you all day. But she seemed to be having a good time. So, Tier 13, the latest lot. I plucked two examples at random. The Paladin and the Priest. Now, these are traditionally some of the hardest ones to get right, or certainly to make kick-ass. It's very easy to make a cool Death Knight. You know, it's skulls, horns, black plate mail. It's pretty straightforward business. But the Paladin and the Priest are tough to make tough, really. But I think these worked really well. I mean, design gave me great briefs to work from. the paladin, I mean, he's still got that classic chivalrous Arthurian knight, but the feathered armor, the feathered blades of the set really give it an aggressive stance. I think it works really well. The priest, I think, is even better because it's very, I mean, to make a priest set that's edgy, that's a little bit sinister, a little bit creepy, it's quite a challenge. And design suggested a Venetian masquerade costume and a blank, staring face. So pulling those together, I mean, I think it gives priests a chance to do something that's a little bit different, a little bit badass, and I mean, hopefully, moving forward with that stuff, we can do more of that edgy stuff in the future. And talking about the future, I mean, what are we going to do next? Where could we see raid sets going? It would be nice at some point to go to a fully componentable system. So instead of it being helmet, shoulder pads, gloves, belt, boots, we can actually do a whole set of armor. So every piece is modeled individually. We can put effects on individual pieces. We can have them animating a little bit. Plus, we can hang attachments like swinging chains and gemstones, all that sort of stuff that makes making something epic a little bit easier. You know, the players are getting a broad, cooler silhouette. All that little detail is actually rendered rather than being overlaid on flat material. So that's raid armor sets. What I want to talk a little bit about now is Mr. Pandaria and the Pandaren themselves. So what do we know about the pandas currently in game? I mean, other than the Wandering Brewmaster. I mean, there's not a great deal of background there in WoW. So it really meant we went back to the drawing board, did a lot of research. We're asking players to come and explore this new continent. So we had to make sure that we built it from the ground up. We built the lore, the history, the culture. So end of last year, we started doing researching a lot of Asian myths, the legends, the culture, the history. One of the things that design was keen to point out, that the Pandaren are a race that are at peace with themselves. That's pretty unusual for World of Warcraft, you know? There's no petty factions, there's no rivalry within Pandaren society, but we still, to hang quest lines off, but we still have to have that depth, that breadth of story and history. So one of the things that we hit on, Asian myth features animals an awful lot. If you talk about ancestor spirits, I mean, ancestor worship, that's a big thing in Asian culture. And animals are featured very highly in those myths, and they're usually tied to a group of other themes. There'll be a compass point, an element, a color, all these things associated with this one creature. So the four ancestor spirits that we decided on were the white tiger of the west, the red crane of the south, the jade dragon of the east, and the black ox of the north. And these are obviously in statue form. But you'll see their style, their influence in all the different regions of Pandaria. But how does that translate to the Pandaren themselves? Well, these are aspects of the Pandaren psyche, if you will. And we decided to build some clans around them. So you've got the white tigers of the north there, military, austere. The red cranes in the top there, flamboyant, passionate. The red crane element is fire. So there's a lot of conjuration, a lot of sorcerers, a lot of mages in the red cranes. Jade dragons, as you can probably tell from the sketch, serene, meditative. I suppose the real world equivalent would be Shaolin monks. And in the middle, we've got the Shadow Pan. The Shadow Pan are a little bit different. They're darker, they're edgier, a little bit sinister. They're panda ninjas. We want panda ninjas. And the Shadow Pan are engaged in a timeless struggle with the Shah. What's the Shah, I hear you ask?
Hey, what's the Shah?
What's the Shah, man?
What's the Shah?
Well, one of the things when I was doing research I read up about was Feng Shui. Now, to this unenlightened Westerner, it's the Chinese art of furniture arranging. But it's clearly a lot more than that. I mean, it's an ancient law. But I thought, well, what if the Shah was a physical force, a manifestation? You know, what if the Shah being the darker side of the Feng Shui? Qi is the channeling of the positive energies. The Shah is the dark stuff you try to disperse when you arrange your couch. But what if it was real? What if it had power and menace? And what if events of the Cataclysm and the Horde and Alliance arriving in Pandaria threw the Shah into ascendancy? So suddenly it's about wrestling balance back into the world. And that seemed to fit with the culture we were developing for the Pandaren too. So I mean, here's examples here of the sort of the idea. You had Shah, the little little smoky motes that you find, you know, scurrying around a house. But they build, they grow, and they get more powerful and bigger and more menacing. We did toy with the idea of a little bear-on-bear action. Perhaps the Shah can possess the Pandaren and you find yourself fighting your brothers. But of course, wouldn't be World of Warcraft without big bosses. You know, I mean, how else are you going to get that raid armor that I talked about earlier? So in places of great suffering, the Shah pools, becomes more powerful, and that's when you get the huge bosses that you expect to see in our raids. And that's it for me. I'm now going to hand you over. Thank you very much. Thank you for your indulgence. Bless you, bless you. I'm going to hand you over now to Thomas Blue, who has the odious task of turning these scribbles into in-game models. So, Thomas.
Thank you, Mark. That was very informative.
Thank you.
So I'm Thomas Blue, and the video that we're not seeing, nope.
This is what we get for having a presentation in the morning.
I did go back.
Oh.
So this is the first panel, and there's the video.
Awesome.
It's very dark. So this is where you see the character team. Okay, so they're 10 of the hardest working artists in the MMO industry. And these are the guys who make weapons, armor sets, critters, mobs, bosses, pets, and player characters. As we planned to add the Pandaren, we looked back to what we had done before, and we had a lot of existing ideas. They existed in Warcraft, and now we wanted to reintroduce them to World of Warcraft. Some of our ideas were cute and cuddly, others were fierce and vicious. We'd made a model more than 5 years ago to put into WoW. So adding Pandarens aren't completely new. And we've redefined that idea, and after making the base model, we have to make it work with all of our player systems. So we have to add things like boots, gloves, capes, so that way they can wear all of the existing armor sets and all of the weapons in WoW. It takes several months of artist collaboration to finish a new player model. So the Pandaren come to us with their own set of enemies.
Yay.
Oh, we're rolling.
Hey,
Are we?
we are.
Hey, so there's the character.
Hey, by the way, good job, Blue. That was badass, dude.
Excellent work.
So you can see some of these character artists over at the artist stage later this afternoon. You can catch Rob Sevilla and John McConnell. They'll be doing demonstrations of how we make weapons and some armor pieces. I will. So, as we planned to add the Pandaren, we looked back to what we had done before. These are those examples of our concepts and creatures that we'd had in Warcraft before. As you notice, some of them are cute and cuddly. Some of them are fierce. Most of these concepts were done by Chris Metzen and Sammy. Even a dark version of the Pandaren. So this is our model from 5 years ago. You know, it was good, but Chris redefined how he wanted to see them today. So here we're going to see adding the gloves, boots, and other geosets needed for dressing up pandas. And here they are wearing some of the new clothes and old clothes. Notice the faces, they're very expressive. Gangster bear. All right, so here are the Hozu. They're one of the enemies of the Pandaren. They're a crazed monkey race. And here we have the verming. They're an obnoxious rabbit-like creature with a vegetable-worshipping fetish. And this is how some of our artists envision the new mantid. Okay, so those are some of the new races going into the new expansion, but the character team's been working on creatures for both the expansion and the upcoming 4.3 patch. And here's a small collection of their recent work. I mentioned armor sets earlier. In the past 6 months, we've made raid sets, dungeon sets, PvP season sets, and starting Pandaren sets. We made between 3 and 5 color variations of every set. So in that 6-month time, we've added more than 100 new armor set looks. I'm also the lead technical artist. And this is the tech art team. Tech artists are the unsung heroes of game art development. They make tools and define processes that allow artists to focus on making great art. One of the many roles that a tech artist can have is that of a rigger. A rigger is a person who puts bones and specialized controls onto a model that animators then use to bring creatures and characters to life. The Pandaren has our most modern rig with an amazing facial system that allows for great amounts of personality and expression to be placed on top of already incredible animations. Thank you.
Woo. Awesome job, Blue. Little technical difficulty, no worries. So, unfortunately, our lead animator can't be here with us, or this morning, I guess. So you're gonna have to bear with me trying to get through talking about our animations. So I'll try to make it exciting for you. But before I get started on that, are you guys excited about this stuff? Like, is Pandaren? Okay. What about, how about you guys? How excited are you? Nice. What about you guys? Nice. And you guys? Awesome. Thank you so much, because we're stoked, and we've been working really flipping hard to make this stuff kick ass, and I think so far we've seen some pretty cool stuff. And sorry about the character video. Clearly, we're not the only ones who were drinking last night, and everyone's a little hungover this morning. So let's talk about animations. So our animation team, we have 8 animators and 1 effects animator, which means that these guys are responsible for creating over 800 animations per expansion, which is a daunting number because animation is a lot of hard work. So one of the things we try to do with animation is that even though all these guys are working on the same, and girls are working on the same, or I'm sorry, women are working on the same animation at the same time, we want to make sure that the end game looks like one person made all of the animation for one character. So at any one given time, every animator in the bullpen will be working on, say, the Pandaren or the Mantid or any one race, and they all work together as a group to make sure that this stuff is coming together and looking consistent. This is a little bit of a movement animation, and we wanted to break it out and kind of show you guys against a white screen what we've done recently to kind of upgrade our character animation system. We have an awesome rigger. Alexis Mead has done a fantastic job making these guys come to life. Blue talked a little bit about that. Here you can see how it all came out. One of the new things that we're really excited about is squash and stretch, as well as almost 10 times the number of bones in the face that we previously had in older character models. So what that allows us to do is get the expressions that you'll probably see if you're in his face as he's jumping around. And also, if you watch his belly when he's running around doing this stuff, you can see that jiggle. We weren't previously able to do that, and it's opened up a whole new realm of stuff we can accomplish with animation. And he's bored with what I'm saying, so he's going to meditate. So that's the conversation animation. One of the things that's super important with these guys especially, but characters in general, is nailing the silhouette. These monk animations illustrate that point against this white background because the animators worked really hard to make sure that in any viewpoint you could really tell the breakdown and the silhouette of what the character is actually doing. These attack animations have to happen within a second, so they're working really hard to get across exactly what the character's doing in that short period of time. And I'd like to say that that they filmed me doing this stuff for reference, but unfortunately it was a combination of a couple people on the team who are a little bit better at martial arts than I am, and then studying, you know, cool Shaolin-style martial arts and that kind of stuff. You can tell I've well practiced on this animation bit, right? So unarmed combat was very important to us. We wanted to make sure that it had that really cool kind of Shaolin Kung Fu monk style. And then all of a sudden they have to have this weapon. And game animation is interesting because not only do these things have to work with unarmed combat, but all of a sudden they have to hold a sword or hold a staff. So a challenge for the animation team is making sure that the animations they do in unarmed combat come through when they're holding a weapon. And this is sort of illustrating exactly what that's doing. You can see all these animations if you play the demo. It's kind of a breakdown of exactly what we've done for the basic animation so far. This is our effects team, essentially. So what we're trying to do here is show that using the claw system, we want to get a much more dynamic relationship between the character and the effects that are happening, so that when he's casting and doing his summoning, you can actually see it affecting the character a lot more than it ever has before. And while you're watching these last 10 seconds, I just want to congratulate my mom for hitting level 80 before she came to visit us at BlizzCon. Congratulations, Linda. All right, so let's get started on the rest of it. So now that we have these guys rigged up, we've created them, the character team has done an awesome job of building these little dudes, we got to have a place for them to live, Pandaria. So this is going to illustrate a little bit of like what we're doing with the environment and how this all comes together. And I'm going to hand it off to Gary Plattner to tell you a little bit about how that all happens. Gary?
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, you guys. All right. It's amazing what's involved to get a new character into the game, so good job, incredible. So let's start talking about all the new content that we've been working on that all of you are going to be playing very soon, hopefully.
Definitely.
Very hopefully. All right, that looks cool. Okay, like I said, my name is Gary Plattner. I'm the lead environment artist on World of Warcraft. I'm here.
And I'm Marco Kögler. I'm the engine team lead.
Thank you, Marco. Together, we are going to talk about what it takes to put together a world for the World of Warcraft. All right, we were very excited to do this content. Like Chris said earlier, we had wanted to do pandas a long time ago, and China and Asia offer so much and so many resources. We weren't really sure exactly where we wanted to go, so the first thing we do is just to start to put stuff on paper so we can figure out the direction we want to go. We knew we wanted a giant turtle, we knew we wanted a whole new panda zone, but until we start getting the things on paper, our team really isn't sure like where exactly we're going to go. So we'll start to make these concepts. Some of these are marks. So we'll start to make these concepts. These concept pieces are super important. They're going to give us a color palette. They're going to tell us what the mood of the zone is going to be. But most of all, they're going to give us a hint of what the final zone could look like. Beautiful. Nice. All right, so believe it or not, there's only 5 of us that work on the exterior environment team. And it's our responsibility to make all of the natural elements of the game. So we'll make all of the tile sets for the ground and the trees and rocks and things like that. And we work very closely with exterior level designers. There's about 10 of those guys. So altogether, there's 15 of us that build the world and place it using our editor. And we're all doing this by hand, by the way, so everything's hand-placed, everything's hand-painted by the 15 of us. Thanks. So I've talked a lot before, if you've ever been to BlizzCon before, I've talked a lot about trees and rocks and grass and the environment, but I've never really talked before about the importance of lighting and our skyboxes. Lighting is huge, it's very emotional, very different. So here's the starting zone. What if we were to take this zone and completely relight it? We didn't change any other art, all we did was change the sky and change the direct light. They all look pretty cool, but they're all very different. So if we want a zone to feel scary, or even dangerous, or pleasant, or happy, we're gonna start doing that with lighting. You might recognize some of these skyboxes, by the way, too. What a big difference. So, skyboxes. Skyboxes are another element that we can use to just add a little more whimsy, add a little more elements to the game. So all they are is a big piece of art that we can use to replace in the horizon. Lets us add a little more style to the game, a little more difference. We first started adding skyboxes in Nagram, was our very first one. And we don't always have to use that. We could use procedural sky like this is computer-generated sky, looks pretty good. Or we'll go with the skybox if we want to be a little more stylistic. Or we'll go with both, like in this case. This is both a procedural sky and a hand-drawn sky. Really cool. Another big part of the game is something we call tile sets. All these are little textures that we can use to paint on the ground to create the game. There's been a lot of technical advancements in tile sets for this expansion. One of the coolest things, I think, okay, here I am just painting a texture at a normal resolution. We've used textures at about 256 forever. Before we're using 64, but check this out. I can actually scale the texture and scale the resolution of the texture. That's incredible. So I can make one texture that could replace the work that I have to do with 3 or 4 textures. So I'm doing one texture that can do all that work, and now I'm just painting in a little bit of rock or a little bit of grass. Just adds more creativity to the game. I think that's amazing. This is our editor, by the way, that we use to create WoW. So that's scalable textures. Another really cool thing, you'll see in a second, is something called height-based texturing, but it lets me paint, for example, snow inside the rocks of another texture, inside the cracks of another texture, rather. If I wanted to do this before, even just a few months ago, I would have had to create a texture with snow in the cracks, create a texture without snow, or create one, you know, a combination of rocks. I would have had to do that with 3 or 4 textures. Now I can basically take a rock texture and a snow texture and combine them any way I want to. This was impossible to do just a few months ago. It is incredible. Thanks, Marco. Very new tech, really exciting, just helps us make the world better. So check this out, this next scene, I'm gonna be painting some rock textures on the ground, and I'm gonna lightly paint, we got pressure-sensitive tablets, so I can lightly paint a little bit of lava between the cracks of another texture. So the harder I push, the more that lava comes through. Isn't that awesome? I would have had to make all those separate textures if I wanted to do that last year. So I'm gonna add a little bit of vertex shading, we'll darken it a little bit, and pop a little red vertex on top of that, just to bring it out. Boom, done. Really cool. So, all right, hold off here. Thank you very much, but all these new tech examples have just made us make the world better and easier and more fun to make, right, Marco?
Thank you, Gary. On the engine team, we're constantly thinking of ways we can improve the look of WoW and just generally make it easier to create content. For this expansion, we came up with a technique that allows objects to pick up the terrain texture in their vicinity. This way we can embed caves into the terrain, or do common things like put the terrain on the back of a gigantic turtle. We now also support secondary animation via dynamics. Hopefully we'll be able to bring those chains that Mark was mentioning to life. We're starting with a Pandaren belt.
Nice.
However, the largest enhancement in this version of the engine is in the lighting. Shadows in WoW traditionally only darken the object rather than obscuring the light source. This resulted in a flat look, even for objects that have a lot of geometric detail. By changing how we calculate the lighting and how we apply it to the scene, we can improve this dramatically. This effect is achieved by looking at the depth information in the scene and then trying to figure out how a location is obscured by its neighbors and then combining that with the lighting. So this is just that mask getting applied here, and then a few before-after shots. With these changes, we feel that we can make the environments look better than ever before in WoW, and we hope to give you many exciting vistas in your journey through Pandaria.
Thanks, Marco. Awesome work. Good job. Marco did an incredible job, and I have to say, after we rehearsed, we were having lunch, had a few drinks in him, and he says, Gary, don't get excited about the scalable textures. But how could I not? It's incredible. For me as an artist, he's just given us more tools to make this expansion the very best one that we've ever done. Absolutely. So thank you, Marco, and
Thank you, Gary,
and everyone else. Thank you, guys. So now that we've created a beautiful environment for you to explore, we're going to move on to some real excitement from the only girl on the team, Wendy, who has...
On the panel.
Yes, sorry. And her team is responsible for all of the buildings and the incredible dungeons that you see in the game.
Thanks, Gary, for that introduction.
Also, you're not the only girl on the team.
Yeah, let's clarify that.
Okay.
The only
Eric used to be a girl.
girl on the stage.
Oh.
Stay on
I'm
target.
getting that one in early because I know what's coming up.
Yeah, that's cool. Way to out him at BlizzCon, man. Sorry, Erica.
And play.
There we go. So hi everyone, my name is Wendy Vetter, apparently the only girl on the panel, and I'm the Dungeon Art Lead for the World of Warcraft team. So while Gary's team has been busy coming up with some amazing looking environments for this expansion, it's the Dungeon team's responsibility to come up with the architectural style and the culture kit for the races, like the buildings and of course the dungeons that you all play in the game. So for the Pandaren, we had a smattering of information, but not a lot to go on, like Mark was mentioning. So just to get the ball rolling, we just kind of started to come up with some questions to figure out who the Pandaren are. There we go. So where do the Pandaren come from? What's their background? What's their personality traits? Are they fat, thin, muscular? What do they eat? I know this sounds like a strange question, but there was some debate whether or not they were going to be veggie eaters or meat eaters, and the meat eaters won, so whatever that means. What kind of skills and characteristics do they have? Basically, how do we go about describing the Pandaren culture? One way we get inspired begins with some brainstorming meetings. Our brainstorming meeting follows around 4 o'clock on a Friday. Okay, so while it may seem we're using a brainstorming meeting as an excuse to just drink wine and eat really good cheese, truthfully, the Dungeon team doesn't need any kind of excuse to drink and eat really good food. We actually do talk and chat and throw ideas around and try to get the creative juices flowing. We also invite other teams along to join in the fun. And we try to make it a collaborative effort, which is kind of important for us. And I think it's one of the values here at Blizzard, being collaborative. So we were lucky this time around to have Dave Kozak, our lead quest designer, help shed some light on who the Pandaren are with his Storytime Hour, as he was called. This also fell around
Dave's
Friday.
Right there. He's right there.
He's looking at you.
Thanks for pointing that out. This also fell around 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. So as being the Dungeon team, we brought our wine and cheese. We recorded the meeting, and just to give you a little bit of a caveat, it is design ideas, so it is subject to change. Here he's talking about Lu Lang, who's kind of a central character, a central role for the starting zone, which hopefully you all had a chance to play here back there on the machines. Yes, yes, hopefully. If not, go do it, but wait until after this panel. Click. Yes? It's going.
Got up on the turtle, me and turtle waded out in the ocean, and he floated in the ocean. And he had with him a big bamboo umbrella. Takes the bamboo umbrella. He opens it up, turns up on his shoulder, the turtle turns around, he looks at everybody. Goodbye. He sails off on the turtle, disappears in the crowd. He's never heard from him. He's never heard from him. It's very sad. 5 years ago, Lang comes back, to everybody's amazement, as the turtle appears over the horizon. The turtle's now bigger. There's a house. He's built a house on top of this turtle. He's got a little garden. He's got a little fence. He's got a little tiny shrine in the center of the turtle's back. Yeah. And the turtle comes up on the beach, and he comes out of his house. He's like, guys, you won't believe it! Up beyond the desert, there's this big giant chasm, and there's like 1,000 stone needles in there. And there's these crazy big old giant cow people. I'm all like, yo, what's up? And I'm like, moo!
We can't get that staff out of his hand now. There he is. All right, come on. Aha, there we go, early concepts. Okay, so once we had a pretty good idea about who the Pandaren were, our team started coming up with some preliminary concepts and ideas. I wanted to show you just kind of the progression. This darn thing. I don't even know what I'm aiming at. There we go. Ah, wireless. Okay. As Mark said, sky's the limit, anything goes. You know, we have some gorgeous concepts here, some really nice silhouettes, and even though we didn't use them necessarily verbatim, it's important it kind of shows the evolution of the design that, to what you see in the game today. So, what did we come up with? We know that the Pandaren are a very colorful and creative race. They're into balance and harmony, at one with the earth, I call that stuff. And we really tried to exemplify that in the temples and the building structures and their housing that you see in the game. So for the starting zone especially, we really wanted it to feel very special and almost ethereal, a place that you would never want to leave. We also wanted their homes to feel very cozy and inviting. One of the challenges we had with this race was that we had to fill a whole entire continent with Pandaren structures. And as Mark had mentioned, there's the 4 clans, each with their own characteristics and designs. So how do we go about doing this? Well, we started with the base structure, and we kind of tweaked the textures, changed out the colors, either simplified or exaggerated the silhouette, depending on where they were placed in the zone, just so they felt more cohesive with their surroundings. So the brewery, okay, very important part for the Pandaren. One of the highest honors of being a Pandaren is becoming a brewmaster. So it's no surprise that we have a whole entire zone dedicated to the Pandaren just making brew. I had plenty of volunteers on the dungeon team willing to go to breweries, sake houses, Oktoberfest, beer tasting festivals, many, many nights and overtime even, just so they could get a clear picture, although probably that's in the morning, of what it means to be a brewmaster. So what we ended up with was kind of a simplified version using a lot of wood and bamboo, kind of pared down. The idea was just to make it so that they didn't have to worry about their housing, because the most important thing for them to do is to make Pandaren brew. So last but not least, let's talk about dungeons. And I know you're all out there, the dungeon players. Let's hear it. Yay! So I wanted to give you a sneak peek of the 4 dungeons that we've been working on in the last couple months. Well, I guess it's been 4 or 5 months. And I had each of the artists that is in charge of the dungeons kind of give you an overview of what stuck out to them and how they pulled some of the characteristics of the Pandaren into the dungeons they're creating.
The Great Wall divides the entire continent of Pandaria. It's a really big wall. It was built not by the Pandas, but by the Mogu. They're an older, more militant race that was in charge before the Pandarans were. When the Pandarans do rise to power, they see the need for the wall and have maintained it ever since. The wall itself needed to be darker and less ornamental than some of our other Pandaren buildings. This is a really big structure, so we left the majority of the wall pretty stark. We did things like use darker colors and use monolithic shapes to give it a real solid and an imposing presence. The Great Gate is the only place on the wall where we went a little more ornate, a little more colorful. This is where all the action happened, so we wanted it to stand out and look the part.
I think with the Ghost Brewery, we didn't want to, it's supposed to be taken over by spirits, but it's not supposed to be like, haunted and scary. So something kind of, fun, and not like spooky. It's kind of like the feel that we try and go for. Well, basically, I just kind of looked at a lot of the classic 2D films, they always have a lot of great artwork, especially the painted backgrounds. So that's always a good resource. And then again, like references from like a lot of the rice sake breweries in China. It's always a good source. A lot of the old Warcraft 3 artwork and Sammy stuff is like very colorful. So I always try to like make my stuff like, you know, just as colorful, just as stylized, kind of differentiate it from like, you know, other artwork.
The East Temple was as challenging to make as I think it will be for players. It was imagined as a massive ancient 1,000-year-old temple hanging off the easternmost point of Pandaria. This dungeon was going to be unique because players would be able to choose from 3 separate paths, so we knew that this would be quite an undertaking.
The Shadowpan are the Pandaren warriors of the Shah, up in the high mountains of the Kunlai summit. The Shah being a dark energy and all, the Shadowpan make it their duty to bring balance to the island as a force of good. In fighting the Shah, however, the Shadowpan have taken in some of that darker energy, so they're a little edgier, as if a little of that darker force is corrupting their sensibilities. So with that in mind, the Shadowpan are more aggressive, a little more stark in nature. So I made an environment with those ideas in mind.
Okay, let's hear it for the dungeon team. Okay, so now that you've seen the Pandaren character design, we've applied the animation, you've been able to see the environment that he's going to be running through and some of the dungeons and the housing that he will be using. I'm going to now turn it over to Eric Browning, who's in charge of the prop team.
I think I forgot my presentation, the whole thing. I've been so full of anxiety sitting here, afraid that my fellow artists out there are going to catch me sitting like this. And so everything's out of my head. I'm just thinking about that this whole time. Oh, am I doing it? Am I doing it? So I'm going to stand up, walk around. So my name is Eric Browning. Got an awesome animation to show my name is Eric Browning. Go away, panda. Aw. Yeah. All right. Eric Browning, prop art lead. So I'm going to talk about propagating Pandaria. Get it? It's a joke. Never mind. It's not the same as panda propagation. That's a different panel. So let's take a look at 500 plus new props that we've made for this expansion. Together. There they are. Soak it in. I like that one right there. I don't like that one, but that one is awesome. So thank you. Enjoy the show. So going back a while, our early concepts, our process always starts with lots of reference gathering. Yeah. And then we draw like crazy. Lots and lots of pictures. Sometimes even using a pencil and paper like old man Gibbons would do.
It's old fart Gibbons. I've told you about that before.
So at this point, it's all about putting down as many ideas as we can. Check this out. It's a goldfish-powered hovering panda mount. I think it's, yeah, no. Does anybody want this? No! Bad players.
You're in
trouble
now.
Chris said you can't have this. It's too awesome. Probably blow up your computer. So we're trying different looks, ideas for exterior stuff. In the upper left, the frog flute, or the frog arena of time, as I like to call it. I thought it could be World of Warcraft, the frog arena of time. Whole different game if we ever do consoles again. Banners, which I'll show you some of these later. Lots and lots of ideas. We have to fill up all these houses, all these dungeons, exterior areas, and the designers at this point are desperate for stuff. They're also working, and they're making, putting zones together, and stories are being written. So they're waiting on us. I'm going to touch on that shortly. Oops. I'm not going to get to see that one. Funny story. So this circular motif that you see a lot in the interiors, I was thinking that these are bears, right? So they hibernate, and so we'll kind of pull. We're grabbing at straws early on, like what kind of element can we pull from to describe their life? Well, what you may not know, this is a little inside baseball, but the Pandarans are based on pandas. No. Yeah. Yeah. Pandas. So pandas, in turn, are based on bears. But unlike real bears, pandas don't hibernate. And I didn't know that, and so I kept pushing my team, oh, you gotta do it. You gotta be like the bears, because they sleep, and they'll be all comfy, and so we'll make this round den shape, and then it'll look like they love to be at home. And yeah, Eric, why don't we make a quest where you get your head stuck in a honeypot, too? It's my stereotyping the bears.
Just got tasked.
So anyway, so this is a training prop. You probably saw this. It's one of the first ideas. It's very simple, but we started to get sort of an idea of like what the shapes would be like. None of these got used. That's mine. That's why I'm sad. Tools. Everything is kind of big and pretty simple. And crates. I love the crates. We always have to have crates. And exterior fences, a balloon that you may or may not have seen today. I just noticed last night that lazy artist, he just threw actual panda bears in there. They're not even the characters, just bears. Just put a bear in there. So now we bring it all together. We take all these ideas, all of the momentum, the creativity that we put together, and we have to collate this and organize this into a central database. And there it is. Now, the producers at this point, or nursemaids, as I like to call them, they have the job of taking all of our ideas and putting them into a task list and a schedule with durations and times for how long it's going to take us to make this stuff, and then tell us this will be done in 2018, the ideas that you guys have, and then work with us to make a more realistic schedule that we can actually finish. That's a schedule. Oh, look at that. Tasks. Lots of tasks. Lots of tasks. I imagine this back and forth process that we do for the producers. For them, I think it's sort of like explaining a sandwich to a jar of butterflies. For the artist, the process is more like you're a child and you've been given puppies, a litter of 5 puppies that you've named, and you love them. And your dad hands you a gun and says, you can keep 3. So, again, crates. Ever since Crash Bandicoot, I've been obsessed with crates, and they're like green being poisonous in a game. You have to have crates, and these are ours. They're very fancy crates. They're so fancy, I wish I had one of these at home. They're our nicest crates. I love them. Exterior stuff, we did a bunch of weapons. You guys have all clicked on these now many times to satisfy a quest. Early on, we're doing lots of exterior stuff because that's where the designers are working, and they need, as they're building up the environment, they need to put things out there. They need to fill out the areas, walls, that training gear. That's all very useful because they can get a lot of reuse out of it. We thought of the art direction for the pandas. We broke it down into three basic sort of classes. We have the city bears, which would be the more concrete, sculpted stuff, a little more uptown. We have the country bears, And that would be more rustic. There'd be like the breweries, the farms. And then we had the universal bear, which would be anything. That just sounds kind of cool, though, universal bear. This would be stuff you could use anywhere. So obviously banners. This is very sad, though, by the way. These banners are so awesome that now we have to redo all the banners in the entire game because these are the best banners we've ever had. Turn you. So how the props help describe the Pandaren. The props should, if they're doing their job right, you should walk by them and kind of get a sense for who owns them or what they're all about. So we made lots of shrines. This speaks to their spirituality. The interior's very cozy. They like to curl up with a good book. They've got their pots and pans and their neat circular thing based on hibernation. Tools. The tools are simple, work the land tools. There's no machinery. They put their pants on one leg at a time, just like you and I. And barrels. More barrels than any other race in the game, I think. This is called over-delivery. So an observation. When I'm looking through these, we use this little red motif on the a lot of the objects to show this is owned by pandas. And the more I looked at these, I thought, you know, those look like guys. Like they've got it's a guy with a bandana on it. And so I put funny eyes on them. They're totally guys. They're like a team. Just something I noticed. Books. Lots and lots of books. This speaks to their knowledge. They're seeking knowledge, remembering it, reading it, writing it. They're monks. They've got the tables where they're recording things. We have lots of this stuff. And what's really neat about this is the text, all the characters. We had to make a language that would be cohesive through everything. It would be convincing when you looked at it. And we made a whole language that has characters with their meanings associated with them. So when you go through Pandaria, if you have the time and wherewithal and a chart like this, you can actually translate the scrolls that are hanging in the temples. This one, which you probably clicked on yesterday, what it actually says is, for in the flow, or in the true heart of the Pandaren, the flow of peace speaks like the wings of many birds, and upon those wings are carried the feathers of 1,000 dreams. Actually, that's crap. I made that up. But what I did do is I took that chart that one of the artists made, and then I, for this presentation, translated that scroll for real. Does anybody want to hear what it really says? This is a big secret. Here it goes. Travel, teacher, village wind, family, stranger, me, city wind, instruction, city wind, go, teacher, go. Visitor, me, wind, travel, building, wind, stranger, me, city, go away, way, teacher, village, wind, teacher. So now we'll play level designer or 8-year-old. Any guesses? That is an 8-year-old. That's my son. His sister wants you to know that she helped tape the backpack onto him and made the fire. So if you leave an 8-year-old alone long enough, they often will make things in the kitchen, wherever. Sometimes they make their own toys, which are pretty awesome. Level designers are a lot like this. And they are also awesome, and when they're waiting for us to give them stuff, they've got nothing to play with, no Legos to build, or no mega blocks to build their things with. And they are both always busy. They often live in their own world. These are the similarities. And when bored, they make their own toys. So when we go and we walk through the world to check and see how the props are being used, we often see stuff like this. What the hell is that? What? And then we just stare at it like, look at, did you make, what? Where did that come from? This is a shrine made from a shrine and a colander and a pear and a banana. They needed it. And why? I didn't see a task come through for this thing, but they apparently needed a fell reaver made from a barber shop and a goblin shredder and a mailbox. Believe it or not, this was inspired by the Pandaren mailbox. I talked to the designer, and it's in there, and somehow it made him think we need to do this with that mailbox. There. We need crane statues for the crane area. This is made from items you can find around your home. And I don't even need to explain this. I can't even figure out what half of this stuff is, but I think there's a bathtub in there and a trophy. And my favorite, the Pandaren hover tank, made from a frying pan, a door, a still, some barrels, and now the animated props, which I'm going to leave you with. And this has not the weepy Chinese violins, but Dark Moon Fair music.
Thanks, everybody. I think we've actually went way over, so I think we're out of time.
You're welcome.
Yeah, enjoy.
Thank you.
Warcraft